All right, let's dive into the story of the original power couple, and, let's be honest, the original dysfunctional family. We're talking about the stormy, complex, and, believe it or not, super influential marriage of Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of the Greek gods.
So you might think the ancient Greeks looked up to them as this perfect model of marriage, but not exactly. The idea was this is a model not to be imitated, but to be observed, you know? Their life was basically a divine soap opera, a celestial drama that held up a mirror to their own society, reflecting all its passions, its rules, and, yeah, its anxieties.
Okay, so let's meet our main players. First, you've got Zeus. He's the king of the gods, ruler of the skies, the one with the thunderbolts. And then you have his sister and his wife, Hera. She was a queen in every sense of the word, with power and pride that could totally match his. On Olympus, really, the only one above her was Zeus himself.
So how in the world did this powerhouse marriage even begin? Well, it wasn't exactly a straightforward romance. Zeus knew Hera was strong, but he also knew she had a soft spot, a deep sense of compassion. So what does he do? He pulls his favorite trick, a disguise. He turns himself into this tiny, shivering little cuckoo bird. And Hera, feeling sorry for it, holds the poor bird to her chest to warm it up. And boom, he reveals his true form. And well, that's how it all started.
But a marriage that starts with a trick, it was pretty much destined for conflict. Their whole relationship was defined by this one, single, unending power struggle. And this divine drama wasn't just for entertainment. It was like a cosmic mirror for the power dynamics, the gender roles, and the social rules of the ancient world.
And this really gets to the heart of their problem. On one side, you have Zeus, the ultimate philanderer. This guy was a master of disguise, constantly chasing after nymphs, princesses, goddesses, you name it. And on the other side, you have Hera, the literal guardian of marriage. She was proud, powerful, and fiercely protective of that sacred bond. So you see, every time Zeus had an affair, it wasn't just him cheating. It was a direct attack on her entire identity, her whole divine purpose.
And this is so important to understand. Hera's jealousy wasn't just personal, it was institutional. There's this quote from a Greek orator back in the 5th century BCE that just nails the mindset of the time. He said, "We have lovers for pleasure, but wife to generate a legitimate heir and be a reliable guardian of our property." See, a wife's main job was to provide a legitimate heir and run the house. Hera was the cosmic embodiment of that, and she guarded her position like a hawk.
Okay, so if you really want to see how this whole conflict played out in practice, there is no better story than the tragedy of Io. She was this beautiful young woman, and, to make things about 1,000 times worse, she was one of Hera's own priestesses. I mean, wow, this story is just a perfect case study. You've got Zeus, the cunning seducer, and Hera, the relentless persecutor. So here's how it all goes down. Zeus is up on Olympus, looking down, and he spots Io, and is just captivated. So he comes down to Earth, but not as himself. He wraps himself and Io in this thick, dark storm cloud to hide what he's doing. But come on, you can't fool the Queen of the Gods that easily. Hera sees this single, weird, dark cloud in an otherwise clear sky, and her alarm bells just go off. She swoops down to investigate, and in a total panic, Zeus transforms Io into a beautiful white cow right as Hera shows up. So Hera arrives, sees this gorgeous cow, and she just knows something is up. But instead of flying into a rage, she plays it so cool. She calmly compliments the heifer and then says, "Oh, she's beautiful. Can I have her as a gift?" And this puts Zeus in an impossible spot, right? If he says no, he's basically admitting everything. But if he says yes, he's handing his lover over to his wife's wrath. So reluctantly, he gives Io to her. And now that Io is in her clutches, Hera's revenge begins. And let me tell you, she unleashes a series of punishments that are so cruel and so creative, they literally become the stuff of legend. This isn't just one single act of revenge, it's a relentless campaign of psychological and physical torment. First up, she assigns Io a jailer, a giant named Argos Panoptis. And this guy was something else. He was covered in 100 eyes. This made him the absolute perfect guard, because only a few of his eyes would be asleep at any one time. He could watch the poor heifer Io constantly, making sure she never ever escaped. But Zeus doesn't just abandon Io. He sends his sneakiest, cleverest son, Hermes, who, let's be real, was often in on his dad's schemes. Hermes is a master of trickery and stealth. He goes up to Argos and starts playing his flute. The melody is so enchanting that, one by one, all 100 of the giant's eyes drift shut. The second Argos is completely asleep, Hermes whips out his sword, and that's the end of the giant.
Now, when Hera finds her loyal servant dead, she doesn't let his watchfulness go to waste. In a pretty incredible move, she takes all 100 of his eyes and places them onto the tail of her sacred bird, the peacock. So when you see the eyes on a peacock's tail, they're not supposed to be a symbol of vanity. No, they represent Hera's internal, unwavering vigilance, a constant, chilling reminder that she is always watching.
So Io is free from Argos, but she is not free from Hera. Not even close. The goddess's next punishment is, honestly, a masterpiece of psychological torture. She sends a gadfly, a big, vicious, biting insect, to chase Io relentlessly. Imagine that. The constant stinging drives the poor heifer mad, forcing her on this desperate flight across the world with absolutely no hope of ever getting any rest.
And this map, this just shows you the insane scale of her suffering. Io's maddened journey takes her across the entire known world. She crosses the sea between Greece and Italy, which we now call the Ionian Sea, named after her. She travels all the way to the Caucasus Mountains, where she actually runs into the chained titan Prometheus. She fords the straits separating Europe and Asia, which becomes known as the Bosphorus, that literally means passage of the ox in her honor. Finally, she makes it to Egypt. And it's only there, after Zeus swears a sacred oath to Hera that he will never look at Io again, that he's finally allowed to change her back into her human form.
So, why are we talking about this? Why does any of this matter? Well, these stories were so much more than just divine soap operas. They were a mirror. They reflected, and honestly, they justified the very real and often very harsh social and legal codes that govern the lives of mortal Greeks, especially when it came to stuff like marriage and infidelity. They helped keep the social order in place by showing, hey, look, even the gods have to deal with the consequences.
And to really get that connection, you have to understand the ancient Greek idea of adultery. It was a really specific crime. It didn't mean a married man having an affair, no. Adultery was when a man, any man, had relations with another man's wife. It was seen as a violation of the husband's property, a threat to his bloodline. The woman's feelings, they weren't really the primary legal concern here.
And the consequences for the guy who got caught? They were severe. The wronged husband had the legal right to kill him on the spot. If he was feeling more practical, he could demand a big cash ransom. Or he could go for public humiliation, which could include shaving off the guy's body hair to sort of symbolically feminize him. But there was one punishment that was especially, well, infamous for its brutality.
It was called rathanidos, which comes from the Greek word for radish. This was the legal right of a husband to inflict a really painful and humiliating public punishment on the adulterer. And yeah, it involved using a radish. It was a punishment designed for ultimate degradation. And as shocking as it is to us, it shows up in their comedies and poems, which tells you it was a very real part of their cultural understanding of justice.
And that really brings us back to this final question. The stories of Zeus and Hera, they gave people a kind of divine blueprint for marital conflict, for property, for punishment. So if the drama on Mount Olympus was this intense, with eternal vigilance and world-spanning torment, what does that tell you about the stakes for everyday people? For the ancient Greeks, these weren't just spooky stories to tell your kids. They were a way of making sense of the world, of reinforcing the social order by showing that even the gods were bound by its most unforgiving rules.